J.D. Vance nails it with his argument for innovation over globalization. It's a relatively long speech. It was a recent speech that he gave to business leaders. And when I say relatively long for me, it's 3 minutes. And I don't listen to really anybody for 3 consecutive minutes. But I did. I was enthralled by what J.D. Vance was saying because he's absolutely right. Watch.
Because there were 2 conceits that our leadership class had when it came to globalization. The first is assuming that we can separate the making of things from the design of things. The idea of globalization was that rich countries would move further up the value chain while the poor countries made the simpler things. You would open an iPhone box and it would say designed in Cupertino, California. Now the implication, of course, is that it would be manufactured in Shenzhen or somewhere else. And yeah, some people might lose their jobs in manufacturing, but they could learn to design, or to use a very popular phrase, learn to code. But I think we got it wrong. It turns out that the geographies that do the manufacturing get awfully good at the designing of things. There are network effects, as you all well understand. The firms that design products work with firms that manufacture. They share intellectual property, they share best practices, and they even sometimes share critical employees. Now, we assume that other nations would always trail us in the value chain, but it turns out that as they got better at the low end of the value chain, they also started catching up on the higher end. We were squeezed from both ends. Now, that was the first conceit of globalization. I think the second is that cheap labor is fundamentally a crutch, and it's a crutch that inhibits innovation. I might even say that it's a drug that too many American firms got addicted to. Now, if you can make a product more cheaply, it's far too easy to do that rather than to innovate. And whether we were offshoring factories to cheap labor economies or importing cheap labor through our immigration system, cheap labor became the drug of Western economies. And I'd say that if you look in nearly every country from Canada to the UK that imported large amounts of cheap labor, you've seen productivity stagnate. I don't think that's not a total happenstance. I think that the connection is very direct. Now, one of the debates you hear on the minimum wage, for instance, is that increases in the minimum wage force firms to automate. So a higher wage at McDonald's means more kiosks. And whatever your views on the wisdom of the minimum wage, I'm not going to comment on that here. Companies innovating in the absence of cheap labor is a good thing. I think most of you are not worried about getting cheaper and cheaper labor. You're worried about innovating, about building new things, about the old formulation of technology is doing more with less. You guys are all trying to do more with less every single day. And so I'd ask my friends, both on the tech optimist side and on the populist side, not to see the failure of the logic of globalization as a failure of innovation. Indeed, I'd say that globalization's hunger for cheap labor is a problem precisely because it's been bad for innovation. Both our working people, our populists, and our innovators gathered here today have the same enemy. And the solution, I believe, is American innovation.
Absolutely it is. Basically, and to break this down in practical terms, not just from a business owner perspective, but also from the perspective of American workers and the American economy itself. The idea is this, is that you can hire 100 cheap workers, for example, in China, okay? And they can do the same as, say, 80 expensive workers in America, but those 100 cheap workers cost half the price of the 80 higher quality American workers. So that's why people went to down that road. And so you lost 80 jobs here. They gained 100 jobs, but the company made more money, or made higher profits, I should say, because they were spending less. What J.D. Vance is suggesting here, and I would say he's 100% correct, is that if we were to forget about globalization, bring everything back to the United States of America and focus on innovation, 2 things would happen. Number one, yes, we would be paying higher wages, but for fewer people, because we would have better innovations, better ways to produce products, to engage in pretty much anything when it comes to industries. You'd be able to do it with fewer people because of the innovations that we're able to create. And then the argument there, though, is that, or the argument against that is, well, then there will be fewer jobs. But here's the thing, and we have to remember this. There are probably, I would say, 100 million jobs that have yet to be created. 100 million jobs that people could do today or tomorrow or very soon that where there is a need for them, but there's not necessarily the appetite or the budget or even the resources, the people to be able to do those jobs. Now, people would contest. They would argue, "Oh, what do you mean there's 100 million jobs that aren't created yet? How could you create more jobs?" I hate to point to Barack Obama, but he had at least his sales pitch, not the follow through, of course, with any of his policies, but the sales pitch for his shovel ready jobs out there. That was pretty close to being accurate. Had he been able to actually invest money into infrastructure, into fixing things, building things, we have roads, we have bridges, we have all sorts of infrastructure challenges that could use tens of thousands of employees. And we're not talking about, you know, tens of thousands of current people working on such projects. I'm saying in addition to, and that's just one aspect. That's just on the infrastructure side. Unfortunately, we don't have the money, we don't have the capital, we don't have the human capital available for that just yet. Why? Because we still have other things that are being done. There are going to be massive changes, just as there have been massive changes throughout history. Whenever, you know, the invention of the printing press, the invention of the assembly line, all of these things reduced the need for the number of humans, but they also created, in many cases, cottage industries where some of those people could then be used somewhere else. Some of those people could go off into different industries. There's not going to be a shortage of jobs as a result of innovation, not until we get to artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence, which will change the game altogether. And that's the type of innovation where it's like, okay, now we're getting into end times scenarios. But that part aside, because that's, even though it sounds like it's the same thing, that type of innovation is a completely separate beast, because that will be paradigm shifting. That will be a complete sea change in everything that we are as a nation and as a world. But until we get there, and I don't know when that's coming, I don't know if it's next year, next decade, next generation. At some point, we're going to get there, and then we have a whole other flurry of problems that we'll have to deal with as a nation that I've discussed many times before. I'm talking about standard incremental innovations that used to be the hallmark of America, that used to be what made us so exceptional. We made the mistake of being enticed by cheap labor, by globalization. It is time for us to get back into the business of innovation, the business of putting people to work, not based upon that this person can't do the job of two people that make less money in another country. We need to get back into the business of innovation where this one person with innovations can do the job of 10 people in China or elsewhere for less money than those other people doing it manually. That's the type of innovation change that we need. And that's what President Trump is trying to do by bringing pretty much everything, every aspect of business, manufacturing, mining, everything, bring it all back as much as possible here in the United States. We keep talking about Ukraine's rare earths and Afghanistan's rare earths and China's rare earths. What about our rare earths? They are here, okay? They are here in North America. We just have to find them. We just have to put the time and the effort and the innovations into making that happen. I firmly believe that if we were to stop pandering to China, if we were to force ourselves as a nation to find alternative sources, whether it's here in North America or elsewhere, if we were to find alternative sources, just as President Trump is trying to do with Ukraine, then we would be better off as a nation. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot that we must import. Everything else we can do right here. We have the people, we have the resources, we have the space, we have everything. We have the climate, we have it all. America should not be dependent on or beholden to any other nation. And unfortunately right now, because of cheap labor, because of globalization, because of the lack of innovation in our industries here, we are in many ways owned by other countries. open up the floodgates of your understanding of what's happening in the world around us. You can do this by subscribing to my very special newsletter. I only publish my most important work there, probably 2-3 times a week max. Go to jdrucker.substack.com, jdrucker.substack.com. It's free.